Hi everybody, the video today is all about introducing a newborn baby into a household with an established dog. Now, in many situations, dogs in our homes have got potential separation issues, or they may have excitability issues, or heaven forbid, they may even have resource guarding issues. Now, this video will be very important because it will explain to you well and truly early on in the pregnancy stage how to actually get your dog ready for when the baby turns up, and more importantly, what steps we need to do to make sure that when the baby does turn up, the baby is 100% safe and the dog knows exactly what it needs to do to get affection. I'm Claude from Canine IQ Dog Training. We're all about science-based, factual, no-nonsense information about owning dogs and what we need to do to make our dogs better and stronger in life. If you're a regular visitor to the YouTube channel, I really appreciate your support and a big thank you. If you're new to the channel and you want to stay in touch with the content, please hit the subscribe button, but more importantly, hit the bell notification. That way you don't miss any future posts. The video today is all about the introduction of a newborn baby into a household with an established dog. And the principle that I like to approach when dealing with this is called the inclusion method, in which case what we're trying to do with an inclusion strategy in managing the situation is to make sure that the dog doesn't lose access to all the primary resources that it had prior to the baby turning up. Now, I did a video a while ago on resource guarding, and one of the important things that we need to understand is the house itself is a primary resource for the dog. If the dog's up on furniture, furniture itself is a resource for the dog, but primarily the people that live in the environment are a resource. And what tends to happen in the context of bringing home a newborn baby, dogs tend to lose access to the humans because the babies need much more assistance and much more attention than the dog did to begin with. And that's usually one of the things that contributes to babies getting bitten, is that the dog feels that it's losing something. So what we'll be doing today is going through a whole series of points that if you follow them and try and understand them as best you can, I guarantee that you will not have any issues, simply because what we are doing in the context of this transition is to go right to the cause of the problem, which is where the dog feels like it doesn't lose anything, and in fact its life is enhanced by every interaction that the baby tends to bring into the environment. It's pretty interesting science behind it, and it produces amazing results. So the first thing that we need to do, and I guess you could call this point number one, is to understand that in particular if we've got a dog that's potentially clingy or needy or has separation issues, is that the house itself primarily has an emotional response to the dog. Kind of like us. If we go to the dentist, we have a particular association with the dentist. If we go to the gym, we have a particular association with the gym. If we go to a restaurant, we have a particular association. Now, the importance of understanding that is that each environment that we go into has a different emotional effect on us. Dogs are exactly the same. So if you could ask a dog how it actually feels inside your house, it would potentially say that this is the most amazing place on earth because it smells good, it's warm, it's safe, I'm around all the people that I love, I get access to all the different resources that I want pretty much on tap. And then as soon as the dog starts to lose any of those, we have potential problems because the dog starts to miss out on a few things. So the very first thing that I do when I find out that a client is pregnant, in the earliest stages possible of the training, or the pregnancy I should say, is that I try and get the people to start to get their dog independent. And what I mean by that is to kind of tip the dog's world upside down a little bit. So one of the things that I try and make people realize is independence in dogs is a highly important thing. So if we get the dog to really like being outside in the backyard, and the backyard itself is a fun, it's a stimulating environment. It's kind of like the recess area for children. When they're at school, they go out and they get to play and they get to do all the really, really fun stuff. Then all of a sudden, when the dog steps out into the backyard, it doesn't feel like it's being punished or it's being isolated. It actually goes out there looking for stimulation and reward. So the backyard, simply by turning up, is a place that predicts excitable, good fun. Conversely, if we start to make the home environment where the dog spends most of its time on a day-to-day basis a place that it has to show calm, self-control, has to show some kind of learning and structure, then all of a sudden, by association, the backyard becomes more interesting. And in a human dynamic, most people would let their children kick a footy or throw a tennis ball out in the backyard, but most parents would say when you come inside the house, sit down, play with your iPad, read a book, do something calm. It's that same mentality that we need to do for dogs. So the very, very first part about this, early on in the pregnancy, is to start to get the dog to understand that the house no longer is a place of excitability, no longer is it a place of high-level stimulation, no longer is it a place that the dog can go crazy. That's what the backyard is for, and the dog needs to spend significantly more time out there to get a benefit of being on its own. So point number 2 is on a similar vein to what we're trying to get the dog to realise about the backyard, and that is developing an amazing association with its bed and an amazing association with its crate. So what we need to do is to start off already where the dog has got a good association with its crate and a good association with its bed. But to make it far more structured, in which case they now become places where we physically interact with the dog on an emotional level. And the reason why I don't want to go down giving the dog a food treat on the bed is because when the baby turns up, what will tend to happen is that the dogs will miss out on affection. They will see the mother pick up the child and give it a hug. Now, dogs understand social cues, so they actually understand that that's an affectionate moment. And if there's any point in time where the dog might actually show elements of dog-related jealousy, it would be under those situations. So what we want to do is to put the dog into a scenario that it can actually get all the affection that it wants, but it has to show relatively calm behaviour to get it. So what I try and get people to do, with the crate door open, the dog goes in the crate, as soon as it does and it relaxes, go over and pat it, and give it lots of affection. Likewise, if it goes over to its mat and it lies down by choice, go over and give it lots of affection, sit down on the floor and pat it like crazy. Or send the dog to its crate, go over and pat it. So once the dog realises that if it removes itself from the scenario and takes itself to a quiet place, the owners or the resources that I really value, which is the people, come over and give me lots of affection. Technically, I've got a venue that I can go to that's always predictive of a really good outcome that's affection and emotion based. And technically, I don't really miss out on anything, because all the behaviours that dogs do by jumping and pushing and trying to get attention is to get our attention. So once we've taught them to get it in a calm and passive way, it's an incredibly strong tool. And this is one that will be very useful going forward in the later stages of this process. Point 3, and this will follow a logical order. Most people, when they have a baby, will already have a designated room for the baby to actually have its bedding and its furniture and everything that they want the baby to grow up in. And similarly to the backyard as a place of excitement, and similarly to the crate and its bed as a place of calm, the baby's room is a place that we should actively take the dogs. Now, a lot of people tend not to let dogs go into where the babies will eventually be sleeping. I'm the opposite. What I try and do is to take the dogs continuously before the baby's born into the room where the baby will eventually be, and take the bed there and get the dog to lie on its bed and just get a lot of time in a passive, calm relationship in that room to get the dog to like going in there, but knowing that that place there is a source of being relaxed and chilled out. Because effectively when the baby turns up down the track, that may be another environment that we then take the dog at different points in time when the baby's in the room and the dog has already learnt that by association, when I'm in this room, I need to be calm and relaxed. So then we're starting to pair the two. So taking the dog into the room where the baby will be spending its time, getting it nice and calm and rewarding it with lots of affection is really important. Point number 4. Now, a lot of dog trainers don't think about this, but when babies turn up, there's a few triggers that actually make the dog a little bit apprehensive. And we'll talk about the whole context of odour and smell a little bit further on, but the first one is noise. Now, babies make all sorts of weird and wonderful funky noises, and if dogs aren't familiar with it, then they're not sure what to deal with it or how to deal with it. So if we simply wait for the baby to turn up before we get the dog used to noises, we're missing the boat. So in the early stages of pregnancy, what I encourage people to do is to get sound bites or apps that actually have noises of babies gurgling, laughing, crying, screaming, and have them continuously on in the house in the background. In particular, when the dogs are in their crate or on their mat and you're giving them affection and they're hearing this noise in the background, the dogs are effectively getting habituated to the noise of the child, so that when it finally turns up, it's not this freaky noise that they have to get used to. They are already conditioned to that noise well and truly in advance before the baby turns up. And in fact, if we do this the right way, if you're hearing through the recording that the baby is crying, and you give the dog affection and you give the dog a pat, then all of a sudden we're starting to deal with what we call classical conditioning, where the dog hears a noise like the baby crying, and then it gets patted, so it starts to associate that noise with affection, which is, again, it's a really strong tool to help in the transition or the training, because it doesn't hear the noise in the opposite way, which is, if we don't do this, the baby cries, the mother throws the dog out, and then she runs over to see how the baby's going. So in that situation, isolating the dog at the context of hearing that noise is a negative encounter. And what we're trying to do with puppies or dogs and babies is to actually have this positive interaction. So playing baby noises early on in the sequence and getting the dog to have a positive association with them, or at least a neutral association with them, is a strong starting point. Point number 5, and this one has to do with odor. So we're well and truly down the process and the baby's now born. So typically, depending on where you live, ladies are kept in the hospital anywhere between 3 and 5 days. Sometimes they get released overnight, but usually 3 from what I'm finding is an average. And those 3 days are effectively gold in terms of getting the dog used to the odor of a child or a newborn baby. So the thing that I suggest people do right off the bat is, as soon as the baby's born, bring home something that smells of the baby. Dogs are highly driven by odor. So the exercise that I like people to do is to use the already predetermined association with the bed. So the dogs already have this great association with being on their bed or in their crate. So now not only are we going to them on their bed and crate and giving them a pat, but now we've got something that smells of the baby, and you can put that in front of the dog. And while the dog is actually having a sniff, while it's on the bed and it's nice and relaxed, we're giving it this great affection. So in the greater context, what we've got is a bed that's producing a really good association with just getting affection. The dog is actually getting physical pats, love, lots of attention. And now we've introduced a third element, which is the odor, which is an amazing new smell. And if we're really clever about this, we're also playing baby noises in the background. So we're reinforcing the association of all these different triggers that the dog will have to deal with when the baby turns up. But we're doing them well and truly before the baby arrives into the house. So then when the baby does turn up, it knows what the smell is because it's already had a good association with it. It knows what the noises are because it's already had a good association with it. And it's been getting affection in the context of all these noises and smells. So we're setting the dog up for a positive interaction with the child right off the bat. Point number 6. Now this is all about the transition of bringing the baby home and having the dog experience the real baby for the first time. Now, the first 5 to 10 minutes of this interaction will set the agenda going forward. So it's vitally important that we don't get this one wrong. So what I invariably ask people to do is, before the interaction happens, is to actually have the dogs outside, because they've been getting used to being outside as a normal part of life. Bring the baby home in its bassinet and put it in a situation where it's safe. And this might sound a little bit funny or a bit strange, but if you've got any furniture which effectively is out of jumping reach or out of stretching reach for the dog, is to put the child in a bassinet on top of that. And there was one lady that I did a session with and had a little cupboard in the lounge room, and the cupboard was about 1.5 meters above the ground, which was perfect. She had the baby in a bassinet, and that was the ideal height. And then what I would like you to do is let the dogs in, or the dog in, and just let it walk around and get familiar with the odor that it already had an association with, because remember, we've already got the dog used to the smell of the newborn child. The dog is already used to the noises that the newborn child is making, because we've done that in the past. And now it's just a matter of getting the dog to deal with the real thing. And what I try and get the people to do is, if the dog is walking in and around the child and it's relatively nice and calm, give it a pat, give it affection. We want to encourage this interaction, safe interaction, where the dog doesn't get direct access to the child, but it hears it and it smells it. It just doesn't see it directly. And this is an important transition, because all of a sudden what we taught it to like before has now been proven in the new environment when the baby comes home. And ideally, I just leave the baby in the bassinet and then just spend some quality time with the dog. Give it affection, give it a pat, take it back to its mat, give it love, release it off its mat, walk around the house, act normal. And the baby is now in the background, and the dog is realizing that The first interaction meant the baby's here and I'm getting lots of really cool affection. Point number 7 is how to make this interaction between dog and baby on a day-to-day basis a bit more realistic and tangible. So what I like to do is to deal with a situation when the baby's awake and when the baby's asleep. So the first one I'm going to talk about is when the baby's asleep. That's an ideal time to spend a little bit more constructive time with the dog that has got a little bit less affection and a bit more work to it, and maybe a bit of play outside in the backyard. So definitely what I ask people to do is when the baby's asleep, take the dog outside in the backyard, throw a ball, have a bit of fun, make it a bit excited, so it starts to realise that it gets a lot of stimulation and physical interaction, physical activity outside in the backyard, but when the baby's asleep. And then if you're really serious about this, bring the dog inside the house and maybe start to do some obedience work to make it realise baby's not around, life isn't as much fun as it was before, and I have to start to do some work in the environment where the baby is. And all of a sudden the dog starts to shape. No baby means work, no baby means not much fun, no baby means no affection, no baby means life is not as much fun as it is when the baby's around. So if we start to make the house a source of obedience training, a bit of work when the baby's asleep, it sets the contrast for when the baby's awake, which is an important thing. Point number 8, when the baby's awake. Now this is a fantastic one. So the baby's been asleep and we haven't been giving the dog much attention. And in fact, we've actually made the dog work a little bit. So the dog is now trying to get affection from us, but it hasn't really got a great deal. And it's time to wake the baby up. This is a perfect time. So what I would do is put the dog onto its mat, go in, wake the baby, bring the baby back out, give it a bit of affection. And because the dog is already used to being on that mat and we've got some really good structure and good obedience to it, what I would get the mother to do is to sit near the dog on that mat and give the dog lots of physical praise, lots of nice pats, still holding the baby. So now we've got this interaction where the baby's now awake and it's in my arms and I'm giving the dog all this really cool affection. And it's something that we've been developing right the way through the sequence, where on that mat, it's already got a positive association with baby odor and baby noises. And now we've got this beautiful transition where it can hear, smell and see the baby and get affection by simply staying chilled out. And it knows that when the baby's asleep, it doesn't get as much of it as when the baby's awake. So it starts to now actively look for the baby because the introduction of the baby effectively means much more attention. So these are the main steps that I'd like you to follow. And the reason why they're important is that what we're trying to do is to establish a behavior pattern that we want the dog to adopt when the baby turns up. But we're training it in the early stages when the baby isn't around. And effectively what we're doing with that is putting the dog into a mode of learning that is not triggered by the baby. And that's a really important thing, because if we wait until the baby's born to then change the dog's behavior and it feels like it's lost something or the changes are difficult to adopt, the dog will associate that being driven by the baby, and that's the last thing you want. So this training methodology effectively teaches the dog a new way to show self-control, a new way to get affection, a new way to get all the resources that it really, really wanted. But what's actually happening is the arrival of the baby, whether it be in person, by sound or by smell, gives the dog the access to the reward. So the baby is now what we call the driver or the facilitator of all the really cool things in life, as opposed to facilitator of all the things that I used to want but I've now lost. This is what the inclusion method is all about, and it's absolutely fundamental going forward. Okay, so there's a lot to digest in all of this video, and I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of questions that might be floating around. So the first thing that's important to understand is drop me a comment. If you have any questions about anything that I've raised, you need a bit more clarification on any of the points, or you're uncertain, or you're a little bit confused, drop me a comment and I'll definitely reply to it. If you've had any bad associations at the moment bringing home your newborn baby and you've probably left it too late and you're wondering how to remedy the situation, leave me a comment and I'll definitely help you. If you think that there's anything that I've raised that potentially might produce a problem down the track, I welcome your opinion and I definitely will respond to you if you leave me a comment. The best way to go forward as dog owners is to stay in touch and ask a lot of questions, and this is what I'm here for. Hope you found the content interesting today. Thanks again for popping by. Talk to you soon.